Welcome to Grove Bites. I'm Richard Steele. Our guest today is Robin Stockitt. He's Rector of St James, Donemana in Northern Ireland. And he's one of the authors of the Grove book with the provocative title, Leaving Church. Grove Bites presenter Steve Morris spoke to him about why he came to write it. And Robin said that it came out of some research his co-author, John Dawson, had done. John is a hospital chaplain. A number of people he was visiting told him they'd previously gone to church, indeed were often very involved, but they'd had a growing feeling that something was not right.
Some of them said they came out of church on a Sunday morning feeling worse than when they went in. And they then thought, well, why would I put myself through this? Why do I go through this every Sunday morning and end up feeling worse? And then over time, they loosened their ties. And I think at the end of chapter 2 of the book, John tried to summarize some of the issues that they felt that they were trying to deal with in terms of how churches are run, the kind of messages that are given, the sort of exhortations to get involved in certain projects, the demand almost to do more, to try harder, to love more, to pray more, to evangelize more, to give more, to whatever you're doing, do more of it. And, if you do more of it, then surely God will bless you. And over time, I think they got tired of that kind of messaging and felt there must be another way to hold on to faith that isn't this kind of incessant hamster wheel of performance. Really.
Do you think, is that's kind of, as it were, crept up on the church, beginning with the charismatic revival, with a kind of angular evangelicalism, and as you say, that kind of almost it's like a business, it's like a performance. Do you think it's something that's happened quite recently, or has that trend been developing over the last 10 or 20 years? I recognize everything that you're saying, of course.
Many people nowadays are looking for a form of faith that's less rigidly defined in terms of certain parameters. One of the phrases that I think my colleague John quoted, or maybe it was me, from Barbara Brown Taylor's book, where she says, I'm more into the beholding business than necessarily the believing business, like behold the Lamb of God. This sense of awe, this sense of transcendence, this sense of mystery, the sense of never being entirely sure what's going on with God, because God can't be packaged and boxed and, neatly labeled. And I think people are looking for that greater sense of transcendence and mystery these days than perhaps they were 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And so I think that's probably a trend in society, really.
Interestingly, I've got another book out next year on wonderment. I'm writing about the sense of wonderment that people feel, and they can't quite put a name to it. And we're trying to pin it down to one thing. Actually, the world's extraordinary, and the people have a great sense of something magical about the world. As Lewis called it, and we need to maybe be a bit more open to that. I was going to ask you though, one of the things you say is that this process of leaving is gradual often, circumstances change. Now we've got COVID at the moment. How's that going to affect, if there is this kind of idea abroad that people want something more flexible, do you think at the end of this, churches will be very different?
Oh, I think they will. I think it's going to make an enormous difference, because what COVID has done is interrupt patterns of behavior and interrupt habits. And then we've developed new habits. So I know I have some friends who on a Sunday morning click on a service whilst in bed and have a cup of coffee, and the bits of the service they don't particularly like, they fast forward. I'm not necessarily saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the sense of, we have a greater sense of freedom to dip in and out of what we want and what we don't want. I think there's also been developing new patterns of relationships. People have found that it's possible to share an evening meal with a friend via Zoom. And we never thought that was possible before a year ago, but now it is possible. So there are opening up new ways of being, and that's bound to affect the way we do church on a Sunday morning or midweek, whatever. I think perhaps what has been lost is a sort of close sense of friendship that you might get on a Sunday, people chatting, bumping into strangers, that kind of delightful human contact that we're familiar with. I think some of that has been lost, and I'm not sure how we'll regain that. But I think certainly the interruption of habit is not necessarily a bad thing.
I wonder, just maybe finally, I'll ask you: are you hopeful about what's about to happen? I mean, it's a very. I mean, you'd imagine, wouldn't you, that Leaving Church is a rather miserable book. But I have to tell you, I was cheering as I read it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So I just wondered, how you, what's the temperature of your faith? How are you feeling about how things are going to be?
In one sense, I'm not despondent about the church, because I think the COVID thing has shaken us up and has made us rethink what does it mean to belong. And belonging is the essence of what church is. And people long for connection with one another. They long for a sense of being part of something. But they don't want belonging that has strings attached or conditions or excessive demands upon them. They want a greater sense of freedom and liberty, and even a sense of joy. And I think if anything good comes out of this lockdown and this COVID phase that we're in, I would like to think it's that. And I think, as I mentioned in the last chapter, there are other forms of church emerging. I interviewed George Lings, as you probably saw at the end of the book, and George Lings was he spent his life working for the church army and promoting church planting. And now he would find a sense of belonging in a dispersed community like the Northumbria community, and finds great. I remember chatting to him, and he said, the Northumbria community meets in person once a month on a Saturday, for example, and they go for a walk, they have a meal, they pray together. And the depth of fellowship that arises from those kind of encounters, he says, for him, was far greater and more meaningful than a casual encounter over coffee on a Sunday morning. And for him, belonging to a dispersed community like that is extremely enriching. And there may be more examples of that sort of emerging over time, that people don't necessarily want a big corporate experience on a Sunday with hundreds of people. They might want something more intimate, more authentic, even more real. So I think there are hopeful signs. At least I would like to think.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you. I thoroughly recommend your Grove booklet. I think it's one of those booklets that really, really makes you think, and it's written very graciously. So thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Well, all I would say in closing was that the booklet was intended to learn from those who've left. It wasn't intended to point the finger of blame or judgment upon anybody. It's just to say, this is a phenomena that's happening. Let's listen and let's learn. And maybe there are lessons we can take from those people who've decided to withdraw from normal church life.
Thank you very much, Robin. Go well.
Robin Stockitt, one of the authors of Leaving Church. To find out more about what he and his co-author John discovered about why people leave churches, go to Grove Books, where you can order Leaving Church as a print copy with free postage or as a PDF. There are many more great Grove books applying the Bible to a wide variety of situations in the world and in the church. They're written by authors who know what they're talking about. Grove Books are bite-sized publications that you can really get your teeth into. Goodbye for now. Hope to see you again soon.